On the gleaming planet of Lamera, where 3 moons cast their silver light across crystal spires, stood the prestigious Starlight Combat Academy. Among its many students, none was more feared or respected than Rex, a blue-skinned warrior from the mighty Stellar Empire. Rex had never lost a fight. Her enhanced muscles, quick reflexes, and natural armor made her virtually unbeatable. Standing 7 feet tall with iridescent scales that shimmered like diamonds, she was the pride of her species and the terror of the training grounds. "Another pathetic attempt," Rex said, looking down at her latest opponent who lay groaning on the mat. The combat training hall fell silent as she stretched her powerful limbs, not even breaking a sweat. "Is there no one in this entire academy who can give me a real challenge?" The instructors exchanged worried glances. Rex's strength was becoming a problem. Her attitude had grown worse with each victory, and now few students dared to even spar with her. The Academy's reputation for fostering unity among species was at risk. That evening, during the Academy's regular council meeting, Master Instructor Bright made an unexpected announcement. "We will be receiving our first human student tomorrow." The other instructors murmured in surprise. Humans were a relatively new species to join the Galactic Federation. Most considered them primitive, having achieved faster-than-light travel only recently. "A human? Here?" Deputy Instructor Light asked, his antenna twitching with concern. "They're from a high-gravity world, but surely they can't handle our advanced combat training?" "This one is different," Master Bright replied, his crystalline form glowing softly. "Her name is Rose. She's a former military specialist from Earth, and she specifically requested to join our advanced combat program." Rex, who had been listening from outside the council chamber, as she often did, smiled to herself. A human? This would be interesting. She had heard stories about these soft, fragile creatures who needed artificial protection just to survive in space. The next morning, Rex watched from her perch in the training hall as the new student arrived. Rose was disappointingly ordinary-looking, only about 5.5 feet tall, with pale skin and dark hair tied back in a simple style. She wore the standard academy training suit, which did little to hide her unimpressive physique. "That's the human?" Rex laughed loudly, making sure everyone could hear. "I've seen tougher-looking maintenance droids." Rose simply smiled and continued her warm-up stretches, seemingly unbothered by the taunt. There was something about her calm demeanor that irritated Rex even more than if she had responded with anger. "I challenge you to a match," Rex declared, jumping down from her perch and landing with a thunderous impact that cracked the reinforced floor. "Unless you're afraid?" The human stopped her stretching and turned to face Rex. Her expression remained neutral, but there was a glint in her eyes that made several nearby students step back. "I accept," Rose said quietly. "Standard rules?" Rex bared her teeth in what passed for a smile among her species. "Full contact, no holds barred. If you dare." As the 2 fighters took their positions on the mat, the training hall quickly filled with spectators. Nobody wanted to miss seeing the mighty Rex put this presumptuous human in her place. What they didn't know was that this match would become legendary in the Academy's history, though not for the reasons anyone expected. The story of what happened next would be told and retold for generations to come, marking the day when Rex learned that true strength sometimes comes in unexpected packages. The training hall hummed with excited whispers as Rex and Rose faced each other on the combat mat. The blue-skinned alien warrior towered over the human, her scales catching the light like polished armor. Master Bright stood at the edge of the mat, his crystalline form glowing with concern. "Last chance to back out, little human," Rex taunted, flexing her impressive muscles. "I wouldn't want to send you back to Earth in a medical pod." Rose's response was to shift into a ready stance that none of the Academy's students recognized. Her feet were planted firmly, hands raised in an unusual guard position. Something about her posture made the more experienced instructors straighten up and pay closer attention. "Begin!" Master Bright announced. Rex launched forward with explosive speed, aiming to end the fight with one devastating punch. Her species was known for their incredible burst movement, and she had defeated many opponents in the first seconds of a match. But Rose wasn't there anymore. The human had moved with such fluid grace that some observers initially thought Rex had simply missed. There was no wasted motion, no dramatic dodge. One moment Rose was in the path of Rex's punch, the next she had shifted just enough for the blow to pass harmlessly by. "Stand still!" Rex growled, launching into a combination of strikes that would have overwhelmed any normal opponent. Each attack was met with the same efficient movement, Rose's feet barely seeming to leave their original position. "Impossible!" someone in the crowd whispered. "Nobody can dodge Rex's attacks like that." The alien warrior's frustration grew with each missed strike. She had never encountered someone who could read her movements so easily. Worse, Rose hadn't even attempted to counterattack yet. She was just avoiding everything. "Fight back!" Rex roared, her scales now glowing with anger. "Stop dancing and fight!" "As you wish," Rose replied quietly. Her next movement was so subtle that many missed it, a slight shift in weight, a minor adjustment of her guard. But to the instructors watching, it was like seeing a master predator prepare to strike. Rex charged in with her most powerful attack, a move that had broken through every defense she'd ever encountered. Her right fist, capable of denting reinforced steel, shot forward like a missile. Rose stepped in rather than away, her left hand moving in a gentle circular motion that seemed to barely touch Rex's attacking arm. But that simple contact completely redirected the massive alien's momentum. Rex's own strength became her undoing as she found herself flying through the air. The impact when she hit the mat was enough to shake the entire training hall. Rex lay there, stunned, trying to understand what had just happened. She had been thrown. Her, the undefeated champion? And the human had made it look effortless. "How?" Rex managed to ask as she struggled to stand. Rose offered her hand to help her up. "Your strength is impressive," she said, "but you rely on it too much. True combat mastery isn't about overwhelming force, it's about understanding energy, balance, and momentum." Rex stared at the offered hand for a long moment before accepting it. As Rose helped her up, the alien warrior felt a strange mix of humiliation and curiosity. "That fighting style. I've never seen anything like it. It's called Aikido," Rose explained. "Just one of many martial arts humans have developed over thousands of years. We may look physically weaker, but we've learned to turn that weakness into strength." The training hall had fallen completely silent. Everyone had just witnessed something unprecedented, not just Rex's defeat, but a completely different approach to combat than anything taught at the academy. Master Bright stepped forward, his crystalline form glowing with approval. "And that, students, is why we welcome diversity at this academy. Every species, every culture, has something valuable to teach us." Rex looked at Rose with new eyes. For the first time in her life, she felt like a beginner again. And strangely, that feeling was more exciting than any victory had ever been. The next few weeks at Starlight Combat Academy brought changes nobody had expected. Rex, once known for training alone, could now be found every morning practicing with Rose. The sight of the towering blue-skinned warrior carefully mimicking the human's precise movements became a regular spectacle. "I don't understand," Rex said one morning, frustration clear in her voice. She had been trying to master a basic Aikido throw for hours. "My strength should make this easier, not harder." Rose shook her head, demonstrating the movement again. "That's exactly the problem. You're still trying to use strength. This technique isn't about being stronger, it's about being smarter." Other students had begun gathering to watch these training sessions. Many were fascinated by the unusual human fighting style, but even more were amazed by Rex's transformation. The formerly arrogant champion now showed patience and dedication as a student. "Watch closely," Rose said, moving in slow motion. "When your opponent pushes, you don't resist. You blend with their energy and redirect it. Like water flowing around a rock." Rex tried again, this time focusing less on power and more on the smooth circular movement Rose had shown her. To her surprise, the practice dummy flew through the air with barely any effort. "I did it!" Rex exclaimed, her scales glowing with excitement rather than anger for once. Then, catching herself, she tried to look more dignified. I mean, that was adequate. Rose smiled knowingly but said nothing about her student's burst of enthusiasm. Instead, she gestured to the gathering of onlookers. Would anyone like to join us? Over the next hour, students who had once feared Rex began approaching the practice area. Rose guided them all through basic movements, with Rex surprisingly stepping in to help demonstrate proper stances. The training hall buzzed with activity and positive energy. However, not everyone was pleased with these developments. In the shadows of the training hall, 3 senior students watched with growing displeasure. Their leader, a reptilian warrior named Blast, had always resented Rex's dominance of the combat rankings. Now this human was changing everything they thought they knew about fighting. This is ridiculous, Blast hissed to his companions. They're making a mockery of real combat training. All this talk about flowing like water, it's nonsense. But you saw what the human did to Rex. One of his followers whispered back. Maybe there's something to it? Blast's scales darkened with anger. Rex has gone soft. And this human, she's destroying everything our academy stands for. Something needs to be done. Later that day, as Rose was heading to her quarters, she found her path blocked by Blast and his group. The reptilian warrior stood nearly as tall as Rex, his scales a dark crimson that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. We challenge you, Blast announced, his voice echoing in the empty corridor. Not to some fancy demonstration match. Real combat. No rules. 3 against 1. Rose remained calm, her posture relaxed but alert. The Academy has rules against unsanctioned matches. Afraid to fight without your precious rules? Blast mocked. Or maybe you only won against Rex because she wasn't taking you seriously? Tomorrow. Dawn. The old training grounds behind the Academy. Blast continued. Unless you're a coward. Before Rose could respond, Rex's voice boomed from behind her. If you challenge my teacher, you challenge me as well. Blast's scales rippled with surprise as Rex stepped into view. The former champion's expression was stern, but there was none of her old arrogance, only quiet determination. You're defending a human? Blast asked incredulously. You've fallen further than I thought. I'm defending someone who showed me a better way, Rex replied. And if you can't see the value in that, then you're the one who has fallen. The tension in the corridor was thick enough to cut with a knife. 2 very different philosophies of combat, and of life, were about to clash, and the outcome would change the Academy forever. Dawn painted the sky in shades of purple and green as Rose and Rex made their way to the old training grounds. The abandoned area lay behind the Academy's main buildings, its cracked platforms and worn-out equipment telling stories of countless past battles. You didn't have to come, Rose said, her breath visible in the cold morning air. This is my fight. Rex shook her head, her scales glowing softly in the early light. You taught me that true strength isn't about fighting alone. Besides, she added with a slight smile, I wouldn't miss seeing you teach them what you taught me. They found Blast and his 2 followers already waiting. The 3 reptilian warriors had brought their battle armor, their scales enhanced with metallic plates that gleamed dangerously. So the human actually came, Blast sneered. And brought her pet project too. How disappointing. I thought you fought your own battles. Rose stepped forward, her simple training suit a stark contrast to their elaborate armor. This isn't about fighting. It's about learning. Even now, I'm offering you a chance to learn something valuable. The only thing we need to learn, Blast snarled, is how quickly a human breaks. He charged forward, his followers spreading out to attack from different angles. What happened next left even Rex amazed. Rose moved like she was dancing between raindrops. Every attack from Blast and his team seemed to miss by mere inches, yet Rose never appeared to be rushing or straining. Stand still and fight! Blast roared, his frustration growing with each failed attack. His followers tried to coordinate their moves, but somehow Rose always seemed to be just out of reach. Fighting isn't about standing still, Rose replied calmly, still moving smoothly between their attacks. It's about understanding movement. Watch carefully. Finally, Rose began to counterattack. Her movements were subtle, a slight redirect here, a gentle push there, but the effects were devastating. One of Blast's followers found himself stumbling into the other. Their armor, meant to protect them, only added to their momentum as they crashed into each other. Blast, seeing his teammates tangled up, charged at Rose with all his strength. This time, Rex recognized what was about to happen. It was the same technique she had been practicing for weeks. Rose stepped in rather than away, her movement so perfectly timed it seemed almost magical. Blast's own momentum did the work. The mighty warrior went flying through the air, his armor now working against him, making him unable to control his fall. The impact when he landed cracked the ground. Blast tried to get up but found himself unable to move properly in his heavy armor. His followers, still trying to untangle themselves, weren't faring any better. "Do you understand now?" Rose asked, walking calmly toward them. "Your armor, your strength, your aggressive attacks, they can all be turned against you. True power comes from understanding this, not from trying to overwhelm your opponent." Rex stepped forward, addressing Blast and his team. "I was like you once. I thought strength was everything. But there's so much more to learn." Blast, still struggling with his armor, looked up at them with a mix of anger and confusion. "Why aren't you finishing us off? You won! Take your victory!" "Victory?" Rose shook her head. "This wasn't about winning or losing. It was about teaching and learning. Now, would you like help getting out of that armor, so we can start your first real lesson?" The sun had fully risen now, casting long shadows across the old training grounds. As Rex helped Blast's followers to their feet, she couldn't help but smile. Just weeks ago, she would have laughed at the idea of helping defeated opponents. Now she understood, every fight was a chance to learn, every opponent a potential teacher or student. Word of what happened at the old training grounds spread through the academy like wildfire. By midday, the regular training hall was packed with students eager to watch Rose's class. Even more surprising was seeing Rex and Blast training together, their previous rivalry transformed into focused cooperation. "Remember," Rose explained to the crowded hall, "strength alone is like a river that floods, powerful but destructive. True mastery is like a river that knows when to flow and when to yield." The Academy's instructors watched from their observation platform, amazed at the changes taking place. Master Bright's crystalline form pulsed with approval as he watched students from different species working together, learning to adapt each technique to their unique bodies and abilities. "I never thought I'd see this," Deputy Instructor Light remarked. "Look at Rex helping the smaller students. And Blast, he's actually listening." Rose moved through the training hall, making small corrections to students' forms. She stopped near Rex, who was showing a group of younger students how to properly fall without getting hurt. "Your scales," Rose noted, gesturing to Rex's shimmering blue skin. "They're glowing differently now. Calmer, steadier." Rex nodded, her expression thoughtful. "My people's scales reflect our inner state. Before, they would flash with anger or pride. Now," she looked around at the students practicing together. "Now they show something else. Understanding," Rose suggested. "Maybe even wisdom." Blast, who had been practicing nearby, approached them. His dark crimson scales had taken on a softer hue, and he moved with less aggression than before. "I owe you both an apology," he said. "I thought strength meant standing alone, proving yourself superior. But this," he gestured to the training hall, "this is real strength." The afternoon's training session transformed into something the Academy had never seen before. Students who had once competed fiercely against each other now worked together, sharing knowledge and helping each other improve. Species that had previously stuck to their own kinds now mixed freely, each bringing unique insights to the training. As the day drew to a close, Master Bright called everyone to gather. His crystalline form glowed brighter than usual as he addressed the assembled students. "Today marks a turning point in our Academy's history," he announced. "We have always taught combat excellence, but Rose has shown us something more valuable, the excellence of unity and understanding." The Master turned to Rose. When we accepted our first human student, some doubted the wisdom of that decision. Now we see that humanity's greatest strength isn't in their muscles or their technology. It's in their ability to adapt, learn, and teach others to do the same. Rex stepped forward, her scales glowing with a steady, peaceful light. Master Bright, if I may speak? At his nod, she continued, addressing her fellow students. I once thought being the strongest meant being the best. Rose taught me that true strength comes from lifting others up, not pushing them down. Blast joined them, his formerly dark scales now showing hints of brighter colors. And I learned that real power isn't in armor or weapons, it's in understanding yourself and your opponent. Rose looked at her students, not just Rex and Blast, but all the faces watching her with new understanding. In my culture, she said, we have a saying, the strongest tree bends in the wind. Your different species, your unique abilities, these aren't limitations. They're opportunities to find new ways of growing stronger together. As the evening sun set, casting rainbow lights through the academy's crystal walls, the training hall remained full of students practicing. But now they moved with new purpose, not to prove themselves better than others, but to help each other improve. 3 months after Rose's arrival at Starlight Combat Academy, the annual intergalactic tournament approached. This prestigious event brought together warriors from academies across the galaxy, and this year, anticipation ran higher than ever. Are you ready? Rose asked, watching Rex complete her morning practice routine. The blue-skinned warrior moved through the forms with a grace that would have seemed impossible just months ago. Thanks to you, Rex replied, her scales glowing with quiet confidence. Though I still can't believe you're not competing. Rose smiled. My role is as a teacher now. Besides, I think you and Blast will represent our academy perfectly. The tournament arena was packed with spectators from 100 different worlds. When Rex stepped onto the competition floor, many who had known her reputation expected to see the same brutal force she'd been famous for. Instead, they witnessed something entirely new. Rex faced opponents of every size and species. But where she once would have tried to overpower them, she now moved like flowing water. Her impressive strength remained, but it was controlled, purposeful, blending with techniques she'd learned from Rose. Incredible, one of the judges remarked. She's combining her natural abilities with human martial arts principles. I've never seen anything like it. Blast, competing in a different bracket, showed similar transformation. His once aggressive style had evolved into something more strategic. He advanced through his matches not through intimidation, but through skill and adaptability. The final match came down to Rex and a champion from another academy, a massive warrior whose species was known for their unstoppable charging attacks. The crowd fell silent as the two competitors faced each other. Begin! The referee announced. The opponent charged forward with devastating power, just as expected. The old Rex would have met force with force. Instead, she remembered Rose's teachings. At the last possible moment, she moved, not away, but into the charge. Her timing was perfect, her technique flawless. The larger warrior went flying, thrown by their own momentum. But Rex wasn't fighting to humiliate. As her opponent fell, she was already moving to help break their fall, showing the same respect Rose had shown her months ago. When the match was declared over, Rex stood victorious, but it was how she won that had everyone talking. In the stands, instructors from other academies were already taking notes, recognizing that they were witnessing a revolution in combat training. At the awards ceremony, Rex did something unprecedented. Instead of accepting the champion's medal alone, she called Rose, Blast, and other students to join her on the platform. This victory isn't mine alone, she announced to the crowd. It belongs to everyone who helped me learn that true strength comes in many forms. Especially to Rose, a human who taught us that being the toughest isn't about who can hit the hardest, it's about who can adapt, learn, and grow the most. Master Bright stepped forward, his crystalline form glowing with pride. From this day forward, Starlight Combat Academy will officially incorporate Earth's martial arts into our curriculum. Rose will lead this new program, teaching students that harmony can be stronger than force. Later that evening, as the celebration continued, Rose found Rex standing alone on one of the Academy's observation decks, watching the 3 moons rise. "Your scales," Rose noted. "They're beautiful tonight." Rex's scales were indeed glowing with a new pattern, rippling colors that seemed to flow like the techniques she had mastered. "They reflect who I've become," she said. "When I first met you, I thought I was the toughest warrior in the Academy. Now I know that being tough isn't about being hard like a rock, it's about being adaptable like water, strong like the wind, and wise like the stars themselves." Rose placed a hand on her friend's arm. "And that understanding makes you stronger than any warrior I've ever known." As they stood there, watching the stars twinkle above the crystal spires of the Academy, both human and alien knew that this was just the beginning. Their story would be told across the galaxy, inspiring others to look beyond their preconceptions and find strength in understanding. Sometimes the greatest victories aren't won through force, but through the courage to learn from those we once thought weaker than ourselves.